The blue
License and
lights
registration.
flashed before the
Where are you headed in
Mercedes
such a
even
hurry tonight?
slowed.
I wasn't aware I
Officer
was
Brock
speeding, officer.
Reynolds had already
Just trying to
stepped
get
out of
home.
his cruiser. He didn't wait, didn't hesitate, didn't check the plate twice. He just walked straight toward the driver's side window, like he already knew exactly what kind of man he was dealing with. Inside the car, Judge Nathaniel Rivers lowered his window halfway. "Evening, officer." Reynolds leaned down slightly, shining his flashlight directly into Rivers' face. "License and registration." Rivers reached slowly for his wallet. Of course. His voice stayed calm, measured, controlled. But Reynolds wasn't listening to tone. He was watching skin color, watching the expensive car, watching confidence he didn't think belonged there. "You know why I stopped you?" "No," Rivers answered calmly. "You rolled through that stop sign back there." Rivers paused. "I did not." Reynolds smirked slightly. That wasn't a question. There was already tension in the air, the kind that didn't belong to a normal traffic stop. Reynolds walked around the vehicle once, slowly, carefully, like he was searching for something he hadn't decided to find yet. Then he stopped behind the trunk. His body camera shifted slightly. The angle changed. His hand reached into his pocket. When he stepped back toward the window, his tone had changed completely. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Rivers blinked once. "Is there a reason?" "I smell narcotics." There was silence for a moment. Then Rivers spoke again. "You do not." Reynolds' smile disappeared. "Step out of the vehicle." Rivers opened the door slowly, or stepped out, hands visible, calm, still calm. Reynolds walked around him once. "Anything illegal in the vehicle I should know about?" "No." "Mind if I search the vehicle?" "I do mind." That answer irritated Reynolds more than anything else had. "You refusing a lawful search?" "I am exercising my constitutional rights." Reynolds stared at him. Longer this time. Then something inside him shifted. Something dangerous. "Turn around." "Officer, turn around." Metal clicked around Rivers' wrists. Tight, unexpected, final. "You're being detained." "For what?" "Possession." Rivers froze. "Possession of what?" Reynolds reached into the passenger side door compartment, pulled out a small plastic bag, white powder inside. Even Reynolds looked satisfied when he held it up. "There it is." Rivers stared at it, then stared at Reynolds. "You planted that." Reynolds leaned closer. "Say that again." "You planted that." Reynolds straightened slowly. "That's a serious accusation." "You committed a serious crime." Reynolds laughed once, short, cold. "You're going downtown." As he guided Rivers toward the cruiser, a second patrol car pulled up behind them. Sergeant Miller stepped out. "What have we got?" "Possession." Miller looked at Rivers, then at the Mercedes, then back at Reynolds. "Possession?" "Cocaine." Miller's eyes narrowed slightly. "You searched the vehicle already?" "Found it in the door." Miller looked back at Rivers again. Something about the situation didn't feel right. Something about Rivers' calm didn't match someone caught with drugs. "What's your name, sir?" Miller asked. "Nathaniel Rivers." Miller froze. Reynolds didn't notice. "Occupation?" Miller asked carefully. Rivers looked directly at him. "Federal district judge." Everything changed. The air shifted instantly. Miller looked at Reynolds slowly. Very slowly. "Brock." Reynolds shrugged. "What?" "Tell me you checked that." "He just said it." Miller stepped closer. "You ran his name?" "No." "You verified identity?" "No." Miller exhaled sharply. "Brock." Reynolds looked irritated now. "He's lying." Rivers spoke again. "I am not." Miller stepped away slightly, pulled out his radio, ran the name. There was silence. Then confirmation came back immediately. Federal Judiciary, active status, United States District Court. Miller closed his eyes briefly. then looked at Reynolds again. "You arrested a federal judge." Reynolds didn't react. Not yet. Then he laughed once. "Well," Miller didn't laugh. "You better be very sure about that evidence." Reynolds's confidence returned instantly. "I am," Rivers spoke quietly. "You should be extremely careful about what happens next, officer." Reynolds ignored him, but Miller didn't, because Miller had seen this before. Arrests like this didn't stay local. They didn't stay quiet. They didn't stay simple. By morning, the police station didn't feel like a station anymore. It felt like a federal building. Phones ringing non-stop, supervisors whispering, doors closing quickly. And Judge Rivers sat silently in the interrogation room. Untouched coffee in front of him. Untouched paperwork. Untouched pen. Detective Harris stepped inside. Judge Rivers, we'd like to ask you a few questions." "I invoke my right to remain silent," Harris nodded. "That's completely understandable. And I request legal counsel." "Already arranged." Rivers leaned back slightly, still calm, still composed, still watching everything. Outside the room, Chief Harrison was already arguing with Reynolds. "You arrested a federal judge?" "Yes." "You found drugs?" "Yes." "Body cam footage?" "Yes." "Search procedure documented?" "Yes." Harrison stared at him. "Good." But he didn't sound convinced, not even close, because something else had just happened. The district attorney's office had called, then called again, then called again, and now the FBI was calling. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. "They're overreacting." Harrison didn't respond. He just walked away. By afternoon, 2 agents walked into the building wearing dark suits and quiet authority. Agent Carter didn't introduce himself twice. "We need the evidence log," Reynolds handed it over confidently. "We also need the body cam footage." "Already submitted," Carter nodded. "And the vehicle footage." Reynolds paused. "What vehicle footage?" Carter looked at him. "The Mercedes security system." Reynolds blinked. "What security system?" Agent Carter didn't smile. "Sentry mode." Reynolds' stomach dropped slightly. Just slightly. He hadn't thought about that. Not once. Across town, Arthur Caldwell was already inside Rivers' office. "You stayed silent." "Yes." "You touched nothing?" "Yes." "You signed nothing?" "Yes." Caldwell smiled slightly. "Good." Rivers leaned forward. "See, he planted the evidence." "I believe you." "There's video." Caldwell stopped. "What?" "There's video." "Where?" "In the vehicle." Caldwell stared at him, then slowly began smiling. "Oh." Back at the station, Reynolds was still confident, still relaxed, still certain he had controlled the situation, until Agent Carter returned, holding a tablet. "Officer Reynolds." "Yes?" "You're going to want to watch this." The screen showed the side angle of the Mercedes, clear, sharp, undeniable. Reynolds approaching the passenger door, opening it, looking around, reaching into his pocket, placing the bag inside, closing the door, then walking back calmly. Reynolds didn't speak, didn't move, didn't blink. Agent Carter looked at him carefully. "Anything you'd like to explain?" Reynolds swallowed once. "This isn't the full video." "It's enough." Chief Harrison stepped into the room slowly, and for the first time that night, Reynolds understood something had gone very wrong, and this story was only beginning. If you're already feeling the tension building in this case, make sure you hit subscribe right now, because what happens next completely destroys Officer Reynolds' career in ways nobody inside that department expected. And it only gets worse from here. The room stayed quiet longer than anyone expected. Reynolds kept staring at the tablet. He replayed the clip once, then again, then a third time, each time hoping something would change, something would disappear, Something would make the footage unclear. But it didn't. It showed everything. Agent Carter finally broke the silence. Officer Reynolds, planting evidence against any citizen is a federal crime. Reynolds swallowed. He rolled through a stop sign. That's not what we're discussing. Chief Harrison stepped closer. His voice was lower now, controlled. Brock, is there anything else we need to know? Reynolds looked at him, then at the screen again, then back at Harrison. No. Agent Carter tapped the tablet once. There's more. Another angle appeared. Rear camera. Clearer this time, slower, undeniable. Reynolds' hand, his pocket, the bag, the door compartment, placement, intent, timing, everything. Miller leaned against the wall quietly. He didn't say anything, but everyone in that room knew what he was thinking. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't procedure failure. This was deliberate. Chief Harrison finally spoke again. You're suspended effective immediately. Reynolds blinked. You can't suspend me. I just did. Agent Carter stepped forward. And you're now under federal investigation. Reynolds laughed once, short, forced. This is ridiculous. No, Carter said calmly. This is serious. Across town, the story had already started spreading. Quietly at first, inside the courthouse, inside the district attorney's office, inside police command channels. Judge Rivers had gone home that night without saying a word publicly. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Arthur Caldwell understood that better than anyone. They're going to panic, Caldwell said while pacing Rivers' living room. They already are. They're going to try to discredit you. I expected that. They'll leak things. I expected that too. Caldwell stopped pacing. They'll try to make this about something else. Rivers nodded once. But it isn't. The smear campaign began 3 days later. A local blog published the first article. Anonymous sources claimed Rivers had a history of hostility toward law enforcement. Then a radio host suggested Rivers had overreacted during a routine stop. Then a union representative hinted the footage might have been taken out of context. Frank O'Connor appeared on television that night. Our officers risk their lives every day, he said confidently. We shouldn't rush to judgment before all the facts come out. Caldwell turned the television off halfway through the interview. They're setting the stage. Rivers didn't look surprised. They're trying to protect him. They're trying to protect the department. Rivers looked toward the window. They're trying to protect the system. 1 week later, the Civil Service Commission hearing began. Reynolds walked into the building like nothing had changed. Suit pressed, jaw tight, confidence forced back into place. Officer Jenkins walked beside him. You think they'll really fire you? They can't. You planted evidence. Reynolds stopped walking. I did not. Jenkins didn't respond. Inside the hearing room, Chief Harrison sat already waiting. So did Agent Carter. So did the district attorney. And at the front of the room, Judge Rivers. Reynolds froze for half a second, then continued walking. The hearing began quietly, procedurally, almost calmly, until the footage played. No one spoke during it. Not once. Not even Reynolds. When the screen went dark again, the commission chair leaned forward. Officer Reynolds, do you dispute the authenticity of this footage? Yes. Agent Carter spoke immediately. It was verified by 3 independent forensic analysts. Reynolds shifted slightly. They're wrong. The chair looked at him carefully. So your testimony today is that this video is fabricated? Yes. Caldwell stood slowly. May I respond? The chair nodded. Caldwell placed another tablet on the table. This is the vehicle's internal security archive. Another clip began playing. This one showed the timestamp overlay. GPS confirmation, audio sync, frame-level continuity. Reynolds' face changed. For the first time, fear appeared. Caldwell spoke quietly. Officer Reynolds placed the evidence himself. Silence filled the room again. Then Agent Carter stood. Officer Brock Reynolds, you are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. The words landed slowly, like something unreal. Reynolds looked at Harrison. You're letting this happen? Harrison didn't answer. Reynolds looked at Miller. You too. Miller shook his head slightly. You did this to yourself. The cuffs clicked again. This time they stayed. Outside the building, reporters were already waiting. Microphones lifted, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, "Officer Reynolds, did you plant evidence on a federal judge?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Inside the federal courtroom weeks later, the prosecution didn't need drama. They had proof. They had video. They had timestamps. They had procedure violations. They had witness testimony. They had everything. Caldwell spoke only once during closing arguments. He believed nobody would challenge him, Caldwell said calmly. He believed authority protected him. He believed the system would stay silent. Reynolds stared forward, expression empty. But the Constitution protects citizens, Caldwell continued, not officers who abuse power. The jury returned in less than 3 hours. Guilty, on every charge. Reynolds' shoulders dropped slowly, like something heavy had finally settled on him. Sentencing came weeks later. The courtroom was full. Reporters, officers, attorneys, observers. Judge Rivers didn't attend. He didn't need to. The judge read the sentence clearly. 25 years in federal prison. Gasps filled the room. Reynolds closed his eyes briefly. 25 years, no parole, no badge, no career, no reputation left to defend. But the consequences weren't finished yet. 2 months later, the civil lawsuit began. City attorneys tried to negotiate quietly, privately, urgently. They knew the footage would play again. They knew jurors would see it again. They knew the damage was already done. Caldwell refused early settlement offers immediately. Not enough, he told them. They doubled the number. Still not enough. By December, the final judgment arrived. $28 million, $3 million compensatory, $25 million punitive. One of the largest misconduct settlements the department had ever seen. Reporters surrounded Rivers outside the courthouse. Judge Rivers, what will you do with the settlement? He paused, then answered calmly, I'm not keeping it. The crowd went quiet. I'm creating something with it. Weeks later, the announcement came. A legal defense initiative, national, independent, focused on protecting citizens facing civil rights violations. Arthur Caldwell stood beside him during the press conference. What will it be called? A reporter asked. Rivers looked directly at the cameras. The Sentinel Project, someone else asked. Why that name? Rivers smiled slightly. Because systems should protect people, not threaten them. 5 years later, the program had defended hundreds of clients. Wrongful arrests overturned, charges dismissed, officers investigated, departments reformed, young attorneys trained, communities protected. Inside a federal correctional facility thousands of miles away, Reynolds sat in silence during intake processing. A corrections officer flipped through paperwork, paused, then looked at him again. You ever heard of the Brock Reynolds Legal Aid Center? Reynolds looked up slowly. What? The officer shrugged. Part of that Sentinel Project thing. Helps people fight bad arrests. Reynolds didn't respond, didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared forward. Because the system he once believed protected him had become the system that exposed him. and the name he once wore with pride had become a warning. Justice didn't just punish corruption. Sometimes it transformed it into protection for everyone else. If this story showed you how powerful accountability can be when truth finally comes to light, make sure you like this video, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel for more real justice stories like this one, because the next case we're covering might shock you even more.